In the early hours over Denmark, a phenomenon unlike anything previously recorded began to unfold. Within a matter of hours, reports of unexplained aerial activity poured in from Copenhagen, Aarhus, and other neighboring towns. What started as isolated accounts of strange lights in the sky quickly escalated into a flood of observations, photographs, and video footage circulating across social media platforms and dedicated UFO forums. Witnesses described a scene that defied conventional explanation. Glowing orbs moving with impossible precision, luminous green lights hovering silently, and objects of massive proportions silently patrolling the night sky. Among the hundreds of images uploaded to online UFO investigation groups, 2 photographs quickly garnered global attention. The craft's sharp geometry and symmetrical structure make it far larger than any conventional drone or known aircraft, and its illumination casts a surreal glow against the darker night backdrop, making it impossible to ignore. Unlike the blurry, often unconvincing photos associated with typical UFO sightings, these images offer an unprecedented clarity. The edges of the triangular form are well defined, the lights evenly spaced, and the overall presence commanding. Observers report being struck by the sheer scale of the object, so large it seemed to dwarf nearby urban structures. Yet it moved silently, effortlessly, as if guided by some unknown intelligence. Many enthusiasts consider these images a breakthrough in documenting unexplained aerial phenomena, citing them as some of the clearest evidence ever captured. Eyewitness accounts, meanwhile, added further layers of intrigue. Some described multiple orbs darting across the sky, their movements rapid, erratic, and seemingly defying the laws of physics. Others recounted glowing green lights, steady and unblinking, hovering for extended periods over both rural landscapes and densely populated areas. A subset of observers insisted they witnessed dark, massive shapes drifting silently, blending into the night until illuminated by their own radiant glow. The diversity of these accounts created confusion, yet the sheer number of reports pointed toward a phenomenon that could not be dismissed. Social media platforms became inundated with footage, screenshots, and speculative commentary. Threads discussing the sightings swelled with activity, ranging from detailed analyses of the images to speculative theories about extraterrestrial craft, secret military operations, or advanced experimental drones. Amateur and professional investigators alike pored over the photos, examining angles, light patterns, and potential reflections, attempting to reconcile what they were seeing with known technology. The speed at which the reports spread amplified public curiosity, while skepticism collided with awe in a tense digital debate. Observers noted that the phenomenon was not confined to Denmark alone. Reports emerged from southern Sweden and northern Germany, where similar triangular formations, glowing orbs, and green lights had been seen. The geographic breadth of these sightings suggested that the phenomenon was not localized, raising questions about coordination, scale, and intent. Was this a single anomalous event, or an ongoing aerial phenomenon stretching across multiple countries? The lack of official acknowledgement intensified the mystery, with citizens and researchers alike demanding answers that were slow to materialize. Historical context added further intrigue. Northern Europe has long been the site of mysterious aerial events, unexplained lights over the North Sea, radar contacts with no corresponding aircraft, and decades of anecdotal sightings have all contributed to a rich tapestry of UFO lore. Yet what was occurring now was unprecedented. The clarity of the imagery, the volume of eyewitness accounts, and the apparent intelligence behind the craft's movement were unlike any previous wave. The night sky was alive with activity, and the world watched, riveted and apprehensive. Despite the mounting evidence, authorities remained largely silent. No statements were issued by local aviation authorities or government officials, leaving room for speculation and uncertainty. Analysts debated whether the phenomenon represented classified military testing, an international technological demonstration, or a true extraterrestrial visitation. Online forums buzzed with theory after theory, some grounded in historical precedent, others purely speculative. The lack of official comment fueled fear, curiosity, and fascination in equal measure. Amidst this storm of activity, the public's attention was drawn to the images themselves. The photographs were more than mere documentation. They were a window into a reality that challenged perception. Each line, each glowing point of light, and each shadowed angle hinted at something beyond ordinary comprehension. The triangular craft, with its precise geometry and glowing underside, became the focal point of a growing investigation, capturing the imagination of anyone who saw it. These images were difficult to explain, impossible to ignore, and impossible to categorize within existing frameworks of aerial technology. As the evening descended over Denmark, the phenomenon showed no sign of abating. Reports continued to pour in, now numbering in the hundreds, each adding a new layer to the unfolding mystery. Witnesses spoke of lights lingering for hours, moving in coordinated patterns, or vanishing abruptly without explanation. The public debate intensified. Some demanded scientific scrutiny, others sought protection from a possible threat, while many simply marveled at the impossible spectacle above their cities. The skies had become a theater of uncertainty, an open question suspended between reality and speculation. In this first wave, the pattern was clear. Something extraordinary was occurring, something that did not conform to conventional aerial activity. The images, eyewitness reports, and social media amplification combined to form a narrative of unprecedented clarity and scale. Yet even as researchers attempted to analyze and contextualize the sightings, the phenomenon retained its mystery. The outbreak of unexplained aerial events in Denmark was not just an isolated curiosity. It was the beginning of a sequence that would challenge assumptions, spark global discussion, and leave a lasting imprint on the record of unexplained phenomena. And so, as night deepened over the cities and countryside of Northern Europe, the eyes of the world turned skyward. What hovered there was unknown, potentially intelligent, and undeniably real. The first chapter of this unfolding story had been written in lights, photographs, and eyewitness accounts, but the ending, as yet, remained unwritten. As the first wave of sightings settled into public consciousness, investigators, enthusiasts, and ordinary observers turned their attention to the photographs and video footage flooding social media. Unlike the typical blurry images that have long frustrated UFO researchers, these captures offered unprecedented clarity. Triangular craft with precise edges, glowing lights meticulously aligned along their undersides, and a geometry that defied conventional design could be discerned in startling detail. For the first time in years, the elusive question, "What exactly is out there?" could be examined with tangible visual evidence. The first notable image depicted a vast black triangular formation, its outline sharp against the evening sky. A series of bright emerald green lights ran along its underside, pulsing faintly in a pattern that suggested purpose, not randomness. Observers immediately noted that the object appeared larger than any known civilian or military drone. Its stability in the sky, despite its immense size, defied both aerodynamics and conventional engineering. The second photograph, captured by a separate witness several kilometers away, confirmed the presence of a similar craft, this one hovering silently with glowing lights arranged in a symmetrical formation. Taken together, the images painted a picture of something both massive and precise, seemingly operating with intelligence beyond human control. Eyewitness testimonies further complicated the narrative. Some individuals described bright orbs darting with lightning speed, weaving between buildings and trees, performing maneuvers that no known aircraft could replicate. Others recounted steady green lights hovering for extended periods over city centers, moving almost imperceptibly, yet remaining visible for upwards of an hour. A handful of observers even reported massive dark shapes hovering silently, blending with the night until illuminated by their own radiant glow. These diverse reports created apparent contradictions, yet each description pointed toward a phenomenon that resisted conventional categorization. For analysts and enthusiasts alike, these photographs represented more than just anomalies. They were evidence challenging long-standing skepticism. The precision of the triangular shapes, the symmetrical arrangement of lights, and the massive scale of the objects stood in stark contrast to the blurry, grainy images that had historically dominated UFO discourse. Unlike earlier cases, which critics dismissed as drones, satellites, or atmospheric anomalies. These captures allowed for detailed examination. The angles, shadowing, and relative distances suggested that these were not merely optical illusions or camera artifacts. They were something real, present, and substantial in the sky. The discussion quickly shifted from the images themselves to the broader implications of the sightings. Military analysts speculated about advanced drone tests, either domestic or foreign, possibly operating under classified programs. Some suggested that these objects could represent a technological leap in autonomous aerial vehicles, capable of sustained hover, silent propulsion, and coordinated navigation over populated regions. Others leaned toward extraterrestrial explanations, pointing out that triangular craft with glowing lights have a long and storied presence in UFO lore dating back decades. The glowing green underside, in particular, was a recurring motif in historical sightings, lending credence to the theory that these objects might not be of this world. Confounding the analysis was the sheer diversity of eyewitness accounts. Some described synchronized movement among multiple lights, while others saw solitary objects drifting silently. Patterns that emerged from one location sometimes contradicted reports from another, raising questions about perception, distance, and the possibility of multiple phenomena occurring simultaneously. The contradictions fueled debate, yet they also reinforced the idea that the observed events were neither isolated nor mundane. The convergence of hundreds of reports across Denmark and neighboring countries suggested a coordinated or large-scale phenomenon, unlike any typical aerial anomaly. For many in the UFO research community, the images served as proof that previous skepticism may have been overly cautious. The clarity allowed for detailed analyses of shape, light pattern, and movement trajectory. Triangular forms were not only geometrically precise, but also appeared to maintain a consistent orientation relative to the ground, hinting at controlled flight. The glowing lights, while aesthetically striking, seemed functional, possibly serving as navigation indicators, communication signals, or energy signatures. While the exact purpose remained unknown, these details suggested deliberate design, whether human or otherwise. Social media became a virtual laboratory. Threads dissected each photograph, creating overlays, 3D reconstructions, and comparative charts to illustrate size, trajectory, and relative position. Amateur drone enthusiasts compared observed flight patterns against known capabilities of commercial and military drones, often concluding that the objects exceeded human technology in both endurance and maneuverability. Aviation experts weighed in cautiously, noting that no conventional aircraft could sustain such stationary hover at these sizes without producing noticeable sound or exhaust. The evidence therefore pointed toward either advanced experimental technology or something outside conventional understanding. The global attention intensified when researchers noted the simultaneity of reports across multiple nations. From southern Sweden to northern Germany, witnesses described triangular craft, glowing orbs, and luminous green lights behaving in ways that defied standard flight physics. The cross-border nature of the phenomenon suggested either highly coordinated human testing or an event of unknown origin extending across a large geographical scale. This pattern distinguished the current wave from prior sightings, which were typically localized or sporadic. Whatever was occurring was not only persistent but expansive, spanning hundreds of kilometers in multiple countries. Adding to the intrigue, early speculation about the intent of these objects began to circulate. Were they surveillance drones, designed to monitor civilian areas, or signals of advanced experimentation? Could they be extraterrestrial probes conducting observation, research, or even subtle communication attempts? Some commentators suggested the possibility of disinformation campaigns, with intentionally planted contradictory descriptions to confuse the public. The sudden clarity of the images seemed to contradict that theory. Yet the simultaneous proliferation of social media content made discerning fact from fiction a daunting challenge. As the phenomenon escalated, the clarity of photographic evidence continued to dominate discussions. Unlike previous waves where skepticism hinged on poor image quality, these high-resolution captures allowed for cross-validation of sighting reports. Triangular geometry, symmetrical light patterns, and the consistency of object behavior were now measurable, analyzable, and difficult to dismiss outright. Observers noted that the images captured a scale of activity unprecedented in modern UFO research, suggesting both technological sophistication and deliberate, observable presence. In essence, Part 2 of this unfolding event highlighted a key shift. Evidence had moved from anecdotal accounts to tangible, visual documentation. The combination of eyewitness testimony, high-resolution photography, and multi-nation corroboration created a scenario where the existence of unexplained aerial phenomena could no longer be ignored or trivialized. Skeptics, while offering alternative explanations, were confronted with data that challenged conventional understanding and hinted at a reality that was as extraordinary as it was unsettling. As night turned into morning, analysts, researchers, and enthusiasts alike continued to scrutinize every frame, every angle, and every report. The more evidence surfaced, the more questions arose. What is the origin of these triangular craft? Are the glowing green lights functional, symbolic, or both? And most importantly, why had these objects suddenly appeared in such concentrated numbers across northern Europe? The evidence was clear, compelling, and mysterious, yet it offered no easy answers. For those observing, the only certainty was that the skies were no longer ordinary, and that a new chapter in the study of aerial phenomena had begun. This unprecedented wave of sightings, confirmed by both images and witnesses, marked a turning point in public awareness. The phenomenon was no longer abstract or speculative. It was immediate, tangible, and provoked awe and concern in equal measure. As Part 2 closes, the focus shifts from mere observation to analysis, as investigators and enthusiasts alike seek to decode the implications of what they are witnessing. The evidence itself had become the story, and the story was only beginning. For days, the skies above northern Europe had been alive with strange activity. Photographs, videos, and eyewitness accounts poured in at a pace that rivaled breaking news events. Triangular crafts glowing with emerald intensity, orbs darting across cities, and massive hovering shapes became the subject of endless speculation. And yet, amid the chaos, something even more unsettling emerged. Silence. Silence not in the skies, but from those on the ground who, under normal circumstances, were expected to provide answers. The Danish authorities, confronted with thousands of reports and viral footage dominating international news cycles, issued no immediate statements. Aviation bodies, often quick to dismiss unusual aerial phenomena as weather balloons, drones, or conventional aircraft, refrained from comment. Even the normally talkative meteorological offices, frequently used as convenient scapegoats in such events, maintained an uncharacteristic stillness. The public, hungry for answers, instead found themselves faced with silence, a void that only amplified their anxiety. UFO communities online seized upon this silence as proof of deliberate suppression. Across forums, chat groups, and live-stream debates, enthusiasts claimed that the absence of comment revealed more than an official acknowledgement ever could. For many, the lack of explanation was tantamount to confirmation. Whatever had been seen was not easily dismissed, not a conventional aircraft or drone, and not something that governments were prepared to explain. Silence in this context became its own language, a language of secrecy. Mainstream media outlets, initially cautious in their coverage, soon embraced the unfolding drama. Evening news segments featured interviews with eyewitnesses describing glowing objects hovering above their neighborhoods. Morning radio shows debated whether these were signs of experimental aircraft or visitors from another world. Yet when journalists reached out to government agencies for clarification, their inquiries were met with deflection or no response at all. The unanswered questions fueled public frustration, transforming mystery into suspicion. Experts too joined the chorus of speculation. Aviation analysts appeared on television panels, carefully choosing their words, unwilling to outright dismiss what the public had seen. Some admitted that no known aircraft could remain stationary at such altitude without producing sound or heat signatures. Others compared the objects to known experimental drones, but conceded that the sheer size of the reported triangles exceeded anything currently disclosed by military programs. Skeptics argued that mass hysteria and misinterpretation explained the phenomenon, yet even they struggled to rationalize the clarity of photographic evidence. Historical context added another layer to the discussion. Northern Europe has long been considered a hotspot for unexplained aerial activity. In the decades following World War II, radar operators in the North Sea frequently reported unidentified blips, objects that appeared, accelerated, and vanished without explanation. The so-called Scandinavian wave of sightings in the 1980s featured eerily similar descriptions: triangular craft, glowing orbs, and silent propulsion. Skeptics had dismissed those earlier incidents as atmospheric anomalies or misidentified aircraft. But now, with the sudden clarity of photographic evidence and the sheer volume of witnesses, the past seemed to be repeating itself on a grander scale. For those familiar with these patterns, the current wave felt different. Not because the objects themselves were unprecedented, but because of the scale, intensity, and public reach of the sightings. Never before had so many images, videos, and testimonies emerged simultaneously across multiple nations. Never before had the quality of evidence been so sharp, so undeniable, and so widely distributed across social platforms. And never before had governments been so uncharacteristically silent in the face of a phenomenon gripping millions. In the absence of official explanations, debates raged online. Believers saw this as definitive proof that the truth long hidden was finally surfacing. Skeptics countered that silence from authorities might simply mean a lack of information rather than deliberate suppression. Yet conspiracy theorists quickly filled the vacuum, suggesting that governments knew far more than they were letting on. Claims circulated that military radar had tracked the objects but classified the data. Others suggested that the objects had interacted with civilian aircraft, prompting secret emergency measures. While unconfirmed, these rumors only grew in traction, fueled by the lack of transparency. Meanwhile, those in the aviation world found themselves under intense scrutiny. Pilots, both commercial and private, were suddenly at the center of speculation. Rumors spread that several had reported unidentified objects during flight, but were pressured not to speak publicly. Anonymous accounts began surfacing on online forums, claiming that glowing objects had hovered dangerously close to passenger jets, forcing evasive maneuvers. Whether these accounts were factual or fabricated, they added to the growing tension. If true, silence was not just mysterious, it was dangerous. Perhaps most telling was the global attention the phenomenon began to attract. News outlets in the United States, Asia, and South America picked up the story, framing it as a potential international security concern. Analysts speculated on whether foreign powers were testing advanced surveillance technology over European skies. The idea of Russian or Chinese drones was floated repeatedly, but experts noted the technological discrepancies. No known system matched the silent endurance and maneuverability witnessed. Still, the geopolitical context provided a convenient narrative for those unwilling to confront more extraordinary explanations. The silence, however, was not absolute. Beneath the lack of official statements, subtle indicators suggested that governments were not ignoring the situation. Military aircraft were spotted conducting late-night patrols near reported hotspots. Naval vessels were observed repositioning in the North Sea, ostensibly for routine exercises, but conspicuously aligned with the path of sightings. Civilian air traffic was occasionally diverted, with official explanations citing technical adjustments. These subtle maneuvers hinted that authorities were not uninformed, they were simply unwilling to explain. This unwillingness itself became the heart of the mystery. For decades, UFO discourse had been stifled by ridicule and dismissal. But in the face of mounting evidence, silence now felt like acknowledgement without confession. If authorities truly believed these objects to be mundane, why not say so? Why allow panic, speculation, and conspiracy to spread unchecked? Unless, of course, the truth was more unsettling than the public was prepared to handle. As Part 3 of this unfolding saga draws to a close, one undeniable truth emerges. Silence speaks volumes. Whether through deliberate suppression, lack of understanding, or quiet acknowledgement of something extraordinary, the refusal to comment transformed mystery into menace. It was no longer just about what people had seen in the skies. It was about what their governments were refusing to tell them, and in that silence, the world's imagination filled the void with possibilities far stranger and more terrifying than any official explanation could provide. On the night of September 22nd, silence gave way to disruption. What began as scattered sightings over Denmark, Sweden, and Norway escalated into something far more tangible, a direct interruption of daily life. For the first time since the phenomenon began, the presence in the skies did not merely intrigue or unsettle, it interfered, and the world took notice. Shortly before midnight, reports surfaced that Copenhagen Airport, the busiest air hub in Scandinavia, had initiated a full shutdown of operations. Departures were grounded, arrivals diverted, and thousands of passengers stranded inside terminals. Within an hour, Oslo's Gardermoen Airport announced a similar closure. The official explanation cited unidentified aerial interference in flight corridors, a phrase so vague it seemed deliberately crafted to invite speculation. But the implications were clear. Something was in the skies, and it posed enough of a risk to halt international air travel. Airports are designed to be resilient against disruptions. Weather events, technical malfunctions, and even security scares rarely cause full shutdowns across multiple countries simultaneously. The fact that two major European airports, critical hubs for regional and international traffic, suspended operations in unison suggested a coordinated, high-level response to an extraordinary threat. For travelers caught inside, the confusion was palpable. Stranded passengers described scenes of chaos, departure boards flashing endless delayed and canceled notifications, lines of exhausted travelers snaking through terminals, and security personnel refusing to elaborate on the cause of the shutdown. Social media once again became the battlefield of information. Videos emerged showing grounded aircraft lined up on runways, their lights casting eerie reflections across the tarmac. Other clips captured on shaky phones appeared to show glowing orbs hovering in the distance beyond airport boundaries. In one widely shared video, a triangular formation of lights hung motionless in the night sky near Copenhagen, its symmetry too precise to dismiss as chance. Passengers inside the airport terminal cheered and gasped, some shouting that they were witnessing history. Others expressed fear, covering their children's eyes as the lights loomed over the horizon. The Danish Prime Minister addressed the nation in a hastily arranged press conference the following morning. Her statement was alarming in its vagueness. We are facing an unprecedented interference with our national infrastructure. While we do not yet understand the full nature of these disruptions, we are taking every measure to ensure the safety of our citizens. She avoided the words that millions were waiting to hear. Unidentified flying objects. But the subtext was undeniable. Something had entered Danish airspace, and it was powerful enough to paralyze the nation's critical transportation systems. Norway followed with a similar statement, framed in the language of national security. Officials referenced aerial incursions, a phrase commonly used to describe foreign military aircraft violating sovereign airspace. Yet no country was directly accused, and no evidence was provided. Analysts speculated that governments deliberately avoided assigning blame to prevent escalating tensions with rival powers. But the refusal to provide details only fueled speculation that what hovered above was not simply foreign technology. Something else was at play. The shutdown had immediate ripple effects across Europe. Flight schedules collapsed, with delays cascading into airports from London to Berlin. Travelers vented their frustration online, some angry at the lack of transparency, others fearful of the possibility that they were living through the first stages of a global crisis. News anchors, their voices tinged with unease, reported on the closures as unprecedented events in European aviation history. The narrative shifted overnight. What had been dismissed as fringe speculation about UFOs was now a matter of international concern, disrupting the very arteries of global commerce and travel. Geopolitical commentators rushed to fill the vacuum of official explanations. Some argued that the shutdowns were triggered by suspected Russian drone incursions, a plausible theory given ongoing tensions in Eastern Europe. Others posited cyber attacks, suggesting that airport infrastructure systems had been hacked to fabricate the appearance of aerial interference. Yet aviation experts pushed back. Shutting down entire airports is not a decision taken lightly, nor is it triggered by mere software anomalies. For such drastic action to occur, something physical, observable, and undeniable must have been present in the skies. Meanwhile, ordinary citizens living near Copenhagen and Oslo described unusual aerial activity during the shutdowns. Multiple witnesses reported glowing green lights hovering near runways, some stationary, others moving in erratic bursts before vanishing into the night. A few claimed to have seen massive dark silhouettes blocking out stars overhead, their triangular shapes briefly illuminated by airport floodlights. While these accounts remained anecdotal, they aligned eerily well with earlier reports, reinforcing the idea that whatever had been witnessed across Denmark had now escalated into direct interference with critical infrastructure. Civilian fear began to spread. Was this the beginning of a new type of conflict? One fought not with soldiers, but with untraceable objects in the sky? Commentators warned of psychological warfare, in which the mere presence of unexplained aerial craft could destabilize entire nations. Others raised the possibility of experimental surveillance platforms designed to test Europe's response capabilities. Yet beneath these strategic speculations lay a simpler, more primal fear. The skies were no longer safe. If airports could be shut down overnight by forces unknown, what else might be at risk? The imagery of stranded passengers sleeping on airport floors, children crying in terminals, and planes grounded in perfect rows became symbolic of something larger. Civilization itself, dependent on invisible systems of order, had been exposed as fragile. The sudden paralysis of Europe's aviation network revealed how quickly modern society could be brought to a halt by a phenomenon that governments refused, or were unable, to explain. To many, the shutdowns were not just an inconvenience, they were a warning. And yet, amid this chaos, whispers of a cover-up began to circulate. Anonymous sources claimed that the shutdowns were not a response to danger, but a coordinated attempt to obscure it. That airports had deployed cover drones to distract from the true objects in the skies. That passengers had been deliberately kept inside terminals to prevent direct observation. While these claims lacked verification, they set the stage for deeper questions. Were governments protecting citizens from a threat, or protecting themselves from exposure? As Part 4 closes, one truth remains unshakable. The shutdown of Copenhagen and Oslo marked a turning point. What began as scattered sightings had now escalated into full-scale disruption of international infrastructure. Theories abounded: Russian drones, cyber warfare, secret military projects, or extraterrestrial visitors. Yet none fully accounted for the glowing orbs, the silent triangles, and the unprecedented silence from officials. Fear had spread from the skies to the ground, infecting not only travelers and witnesses, but nations themselves. And behind every unanswered question lingered a chilling realization. The unknown had power, and it had just demonstrated its ability to bring Europe to a standstill. Until this point, everything the public knew about the phenomenon above Northern Europe came from witnesses, shaky videos, and vague government statements. But then, an insider stepped forward. And with his testimony, the story shifted from mystery to possible conspiracy. The insider speaks. The man claimed to be an airport employee. He never revealed his identity, only that he worked in operations at one of the Scandinavian hubs affected by the September 22nd shutdown. In a hushed interview uploaded anonymously, his voice distorted, he made a startling claim that what the public saw on the news, the glowing green drones, the manageable disruptions, was a cover, a deliberate misdirection. According to him, airports deployed their own drones to distract both the media and the masses from far stranger objects that hovered silently in the skies. Airports, he explained, routinely operate small drones for runway inspections, training exercises, and perimeter security. These drones carry standard aviation lights and can easily be identified by radar operators and air traffic controllers. On ordinary days, they blend seamlessly into the routines of airport life. But on nights when unidentified aerial phenomena appeared, hovering near runways or drifting across restricted airspace, the procedure changed. Instead of acknowledging the unknown, Officials launched these familiar drones deliberately, placing them into visible airspace. Their presence created a plausible story for passengers and journalists. The lights you saw? Just airport drones. The smoke screen. The insider described this as a visual smoke screen, a tactic designed not to address the real phenomena, but to distract from them. Witnesses might see glowing lights in the sky and assume they were the same drones being reported by officials. Radar operators could log the friendly signals of airport drones, satisfying protocols, and news outlets hungry for explanations would run with the simplest narrative available. Meanwhile, the true objects, the silent hovering craft with steady unnatural glows and impossible endurance, remained unaddressed, lingering beyond the reach of official acknowledgement. In his words, what we put in the air wasn't to solve the problem, it was to rewrite it, to make something unexplainable look explainable. Unsettling observations. The insider went further, describing the differences between the cover drones and the unknowns. Regular drones made noise, the faint hum of propellers easily audible when flying low. They blinked with navigation lights, red and green strobes designed to comply with international regulations, and they could never stay airborne longer than an hour without refueling or battery replacement. But the objects he and others saw those nights behaved differently. They glowed with a steady, intense light, not blinking. They hovered motionless for hours, ignoring wind currents. And when they moved, they did so with sudden bursts, accelerations that defied the capabilities of any known drone or helicopter. The silence was absolute. No hum, no roar, no mechanical signatures, just radiant orbs or dark triangles hanging in the sky, immune to time and gravity. What disturbed him most was not that these things appeared, but that the official response was never to investigate them in front of staff. It was to conceal. It was like we all knew something was there, but nobody dared to say it aloud, he recalled. The orders were simple. Get the drones up, control the narrative, keep the passengers calm. Protocol or cover-up, or, if his testimony is true, it reframes the September shutdowns entirely. The glowing drones reported by the media may not have been the original intruders, but the decoys launched to obscure them. This suggests that airports and possibly governments have established protocols not just for air safety, but for narrative management. The goal: prevent panic, maintain control, and replace the unknown with something familiar, even if false. But this raises troubling questions. If officials knew the objects weren't conventional drones, why not admit it? Was the secrecy a matter of national security, protecting military technology from exposure? Or was it because the truth was too unexplainable, too destabilizing to reveal? Were the cover drones a shield against hysteria, or a weapon of disinformation? The human cost. The whistleblower described his growing discomfort. At first, he accepted the tactic as necessary. Airports are under immense pressure to keep flights moving, passengers safe, and the public reassured. A single unknown craft near a runway can cause cascading disruptions costing millions. But over time, he began to question the ethics. We weren't just controlling airspace, he said. We were controlling perception. We were deciding what the public could and couldn't believe. He admitted that some of his colleagues quietly shared his unease. A few whispered about the shapes they'd glimpsed in the distance, massive, angular forms blotting out the stars. Others joked darkly that they were working alongside aliens without overtime pay. But official channels remained silent. No briefings, no acknowledgments. Just the same repeated orders. Launch the drones, manage the story, keep the world turning. Public reaction. When fragments of the whistleblower's account surfaced online, reaction was explosive. UFO enthusiasts hailed him as a hero, a rare insider breaking the wall of silence. Skeptics dismissed the story as fabricated, a viral hoax designed to exploit the wave of sightings. But among ordinary viewers, the account struck a nerve. It fit too well with the strangeness of the shutdowns, the vague government statements, the inconsistencies in witness reports, the eerie silence from aviation authorities. Many asked themselves, if officials truly had nothing to hide, why rely on decoys at all? The idea of cover drones also provided a chilling explanation for the contradictions in eyewitness testimony. Some described orbs, others reported green lights. Still others swore they saw massive black triangles. Perhaps, the whistleblower suggested, this confusion was intentional. By flooding the skies with familiar drones during true sightings, officials ensured that no single account could dominate the narrative. Doubt, not clarity, became the weapon. The implications. If his claims are accurate, they suggest a disturbing reality, that the public narrative surrounding UFO events is not simply shaped by speculation, but actively managed from within. That what people believe they saw may be as carefully controlled as air traffic itself, and that the silence of governments is not passive, but strategic. The whistleblower concluded with words that lingered. The question isn't on what was in the sky. The question is why they don't want you to see it. Conspiracy or safety? Not everyone sees this as sinister. Some experts argue that such measures, if true, may be necessary. After all, an unidentified craft hovering near an airport could cause mass panic if acknowledged. A sudden rush of fear in crowded terminals could lead to chaos, even injury. By offering a plausible cover story, officials buy time to investigate without triggering hysteria. In this light, the whistleblower's account may not expose a conspiracy, but a safety protocol, a calculated trade between truth and order. But for many, this explanation rings hollow. The endurance, silence, and size of the unknown objects do not fit within the framework of safety drills or security procedures. If governments are hiding the true nature of these phenomena, then the public is not just being shielded, it's being deceived, setting the stage for the unknown. The whistleblower's testimony transformed the narrative. No longer was the mystery confined to the skies. It now reached into the very institutions meant to protect and inform the public. If airports truly launch decoys to disguise the presence of unexplained craft, then the mystery is deeper, darker, and far more orchestrated than anyone imagined. And it raises a final haunting question. If officials are willing to misdirect us about what hovers above, then what else are they hiding? With every new revelation, the line between conspiracy and reality grows thinner. And as Europe reels from shutdowns, sightings, and silence, one thing becomes certain. The unknown is not just in the air. It's in the system itself. In the stillness that followed the shutdowns, after the statements, the speculation, and the silence, one question began to echo louder than all the others. What were these objects? For days, the skies above Denmark, Norway, and Sweden had been painted with impossible sights. Green glows hovering in the night orbs, darting in defiance of physics in triangular silhouettes that appeared and vanished as if stitched into the fabric of the clouds themselves. Photographs had surfaced, clearer than any blurry UFO cliché. Witness testimonies mounted. Entire airports had shut down. Governments had spoken only in riddles and veiled warnings. And yet, for all the noise, the truth remained hidden. It is here, in the absence of certainty, that the most unsettling possibilities take root. The military theory. The first, and perhaps most comfortable explanation for many, was that these were secret military projects, advanced stealth aircraft, surveillance drones, next-generation prototypes being tested in conditions designed to provoke confusion. It would not be the first time. Throughout history, the development of cutting-edge technology has often been cloaked in misdirection. In the Cold War, entire fleets of experimental craft flew under the guise of UFO sightings. Pilots whispered of glowing disks and impossibly fast objects, only to learn decades later that they had witnessed early spy planes breaking barriers the public never knew existed. Could the triangle craft, with its sharp angles and glowing underside, be the evolution of some classified design? Could the green lights be advanced drone swarms, running tests in hostile airspace, pushing the limits of endurance and maneuverability? And yet, there are problems with this theory. Even the most advanced drones known to the public cannot hover for hours, shift direction at near-instant speeds, or vanish entirely from radar. And if this was truly a controlled military test, why would it risk public panic, airport shutdowns, and international headlines? Why now, and why here? The foreign power theory. The second theory, darker, more unsettling, pointed toward foreign powers. In a world where drones redefine surveillance and cyber warfare has become an invisible battlefield, the idea that Russia, China, or another state actor could be responsible seemed plausible. The Prime Minister's ominous statement about infrastructure attacks hinted at more than coincidence. Imagine fleets of experimental drones sweeping across northern Europe not to attack, but to observe, to map defenses, to probe responses, to seed fear in civilian populations and test how governments would react. But again, contradictions remain. If these were drones, why the eerie luminescent glow? Why the triangular silhouettes that seem to phase in and out of sight? Why the consistency in eyewitness testimonies across borders, each describing not mechanical hums or drone-like buzzing, but silent, otherworldly motion? The extraterrestrial theory. And so we arrive at the most controversial, yet perhaps the most persistent explanation, that what appeared above northern Europe was not of this earth. For decades, UFO communities have debated grainy footage and unreliable witnesses. But this wave was different. The photographs were sharp, the videos captured detail, the testimonies aligned with eerie consistency. Green glows, lights with no source, shining with a purity that seemed alien to human engineering. Orbs darting at impossible speeds yet leaving no contrail, no sound, no heat signature detectable to civilian instruments. Triangular craft, massive in scale, moving with grace no jet could match. And perhaps most damning, the silence of the authorities. If this were mere drones or aircraft, why the stonewalling? Why not dismiss the claims quickly and decisively, as has been done countless times before? Why leave a vacuum for speculation to thrive in, unless the truth itself was something even officials could not fully grasp? The symbolism of the skies. The skies have always been more than empty space. For ancient civilizations, they were the domain of gods and spirits, the canvas upon which myths were painted. For modern humanity, they became a battlefield of planes and missiles, satellites and surveillance. But now, in northern Europe, the skies have transformed into something else entirely. A mirror of our deepest fears and unanswered questions. A reminder that despite our technology, despite our intelligence, there are still forces moving above us that we cannot control, cannot predict, and cannot explain. Perhaps the orbs and triangles are machines of war. Perhaps they are messengers from beyond. Or perhaps, in the most unsettling possibility of all, they are something in between. Entities or technologies that blur the line between what we call science and what we whisper of as myth. The growing fear. As days turned into weeks, the reports slowed but did not vanish. Green glows were still spotted, if less frequently. Rumors of silent flyovers persisted. Farmers spoke of fields illuminated in the dead of night, of animals reacting to something unseen. And yet, no official answers were ever given. Whistleblowers vanished from headlines. Experts moved on. Social media drowned in speculation and memes, while the original fear lingered only in those who had truly seen what hovered above them. For the public, the story became one more mystery, one more headline lost in the churn of global chaos. But for those who watched the skies of Denmark and Norway that September, it was a memory that refused to fade. The final question. So what were they? Military machines cloaked in secrecy? Foreign probes designed to unnerve? Extraterrestrial visitors reminding us of our fragility? Or something stranger still? A phenomenon beyond human understanding, bleeding into our reality from somewhere else. The truth remains locked behind silence and shadows. But perhaps, in the end, the explanations matter less than the questions they leave behind. Because if the skies above northern Europe were breached once, they can be breached again. If impossible objects hovered there, they can hover anywhere. And if governments could not stop them, or chose not to reveal them, then the mystery is not Denmark's alone. Final outro. Mysteries within. And so, we leave northern Europe with more questions than answers. What hovered above their skies may never be fully explained. But the echoes of that September night remind us that mysteries are not relics of the past. They are alive, circling above us, watching, waiting. Tonight, they looked down on Denmark. tomorrow. Perhaps they will look down on us. Because in the end, the greatest mysteries are not buried in history, nor locked away in ancient ruins. They are here, alive in the present, written across the heavens themselves. And if you look up into the night sky long enough, you may just see them too. This has been Mysteries Within. Until next time, keep your eyes open, and never stop questioning what lies above.